I find that there's so many among objectivists who get very discouraged and very depressed so easily. And I think it relates to the point you just made of the world as it is and what we can do about it. And I do think there's a I don't know how accurate this concept is, but I like the idea of being irrationally optimistic. And even though what we really hope that is realistic, but I think with a positive perspective on the world, because I think there's a lot in the world that is positive. I'm curious what you think about that and how you keep and people ask me this all the time, so I'm going to ask you how you keep kind of a positive frame of mind, given, I mean, I think we agree in politics, we agree on a lot of things, that things are really bad. I mean, and culturally, that there's a lot of bad things going on, and the really problems of what we're certainly not in the dark ages. We're still fighting to prevent that from happening one day, because we don't know what's going to happen. How do you keep that positive perspective, given the world in which we live and given the ideas that we hold? Yeah.
Well, let me say, I've always tended to be more on the positive side, and I'll say why I have been. But I just want to say first, as context for this, I think that America is in way worse shape than I thought it was 3 years ago. A lot where I think I was thought it was better than it was 3 years ago, and I think events since have shown me that there were more cracks than I thought there were then. They were bigger than I thought they were then, and they've gotten a lot worse since. And I think the country is in a really, really bad way right now. So I don't want anything I say positive to be, oh, everything's cool. And I also think it's more important to think about how to maintain a positive and life-oriented perspective in light of revelations that things might be worse than you thought. And that those revelations have shook me, and they've made me think about how I want to prioritize what I do differently, and what, I haven't reached any particular decisions about them, but as I think about, do I want to write this paper, and what's the point of it, or that paper, or do this podcast or whatever, these things have been in my mind, and I don't yet have a fully worked out answer to those questions. One's always adjusting one's goals. But this has been a hard period for me. But that said, you're not, the project of life isn't a project of coming into a world that's a prepared environment for you. And, we should try to make prepared environment for our kids, but coming into a world that's a prepared environment for you and playing a preset role that's meant to bring you happiness. And if you have that view, you're never going to be happy. And you're always going to be frustrated by the world you're in. That's just not the nature of nature and the nature of human beings. And the nature of what a human being is and what the world is like is that you have to figure out, given the world you're in and given your abilities, what kind of a life you can make for yourself and find a way to make it. And if you accept that as the problem to be solved in a human life, then a lot of things that seem like they're unfairnesses, and they might actually be unfair in some cases, and a lot of them are, a lot of things that seem like unfairnesses or setbacks, you acknowledge them as such, but then you just take them as part of the context in which you have to do the job of living. Whereas if you expect to be handed a world in which it's easy to have a good life, again, you're always going to be dissatisfied. And then you take that whole perspective, I think, is important. And then when you take that perspective, I mean, look at the world. There is so much we could do and so much possible to us. And when would you have rather have been born? I mean, in some utopia that doesn't yet exist, that it's your job to help try to create? Well, then go sit trying to create it. Or in some past period, and any past period that you might romanticize and might rightly romanticize because it had a lot of really good things about it, also has a lot of really bad things about it. I mean, it's only in the 20s that women got the vote. If you're a woman, I mean, living before then is really awful. And if you're a man, it's awful too, because who wants to, if you're a heterosexual, but either way, who wants to be in a world where half the people you deal with are disenfranchised or seen as second-class citizens? Who are you going to marry? People couldn't be educated. And think about, if you watch television shows about the 50s, and not to mention, Black people or people of other races. And this is not just bad for them, right? It's bad for you as a the allegedly privileged white man. I mean, who are you going to be friends with? Who are you going to benefit from? So who are you going to trade? Who are you going to relate to? So just the obvious changes that the leftists would kind of focus on, right, in the last half century have been these race and sex ones. Not that everything's gotten good with those things. It hasn't, but certain evils have been eliminated. And those are real things you have to think about if you think about, I'd rather live in the 50s when everything was better, supposedly, which it wasn't. Some things were better and some were worse. And likewise, all the technology you'd be giving up. I mean, how much easier it is if you think the culture is worse as a whole, which it's not totally clear to me is, but parts of it certainly are, how much easier it is now to find the niches in it of people who you're interested in, how much more entertainment, intellectual content there is, even if that you can find, because you can do web searches on it and good, have podcast conversations. I mean, there's a lot good now. It's not clear that there's a time when things were there's no time when things were in every way better. And in every time when they were in some ways better, they were in some ways worse. And if you're someone who has real values, right, things that you care about and are making your life about, there are things that you've become attached to and care about and are making your life about in this world. And so you can't want some other world that's nothing like it.
Yep.
Or that's like it only in some abstract way. I think Harry Binswanger, somebody told the story about Ayn Rand being asked, if some aliens came and could take her away to some totally rational future or other planet or something, would she do it? And they were totally capitalist there and so forth. And her answer was, well, she'd have to give up all the things that she loved here. And that would be my answer too. I don't know if she really said that. I only vaguely remember the anecdote. But, I have a wife here and a job here and friends here and things I like that I've made in this world. And they have a kind of coherence to them and a trajectory that I think is making the world better and making my life better. And that's what I value, not the life I would have in some utopia that I'm always, complaining that this life isn't it.
Yeah, and I think it's the living your life focused on those things, focused on the things that you're building. It's I think it boils down to having a life of meaning, having a life of purpose. And I think that when people don't, when they haven't built themselves a life that means something to them, then all they do is yearn for some utopia and are constantly frustrated and angry and disappointed in the world in which they live. They're not being selfish. They're not being self-interested in the full sense of what that means.
I think that's right. And utopian longings and kind of ideals that are disconnected from anything you can do to actually reach them, that you could expect to succeed at, or at least make real progress at and enjoy that progress. Any ideal like that is not really a value and not really an ideal. It's a kind of rationalization or excuse for not making your life better.